I'm Kari Rowe, joined by...
And I'm Meredith.
My wife, Meredith, and you're listening to the Foreign Saints podcast, a show committed to the spiritual and social vision of Jesus Christ. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go into the world around us and make disciples of all who would hear us. And we are talking this week about the ethics of Nickelodeon and child acting and all sorts of other cultural hypocrisies.
And all the things that stem from it.
A lot of the things that stem from it. Fair warning, somewhat explicit content this time around, up to and including gasp, shock, and surprise. Husband headship in the family.
Didn't expect that as a part of the label.
I'm just saying, of all the things that are going to actually be offensive to people, somehow, even though we're talking about sexual abuse and predation upon minors, people are going to be more mad about that. Yeah. So, isn't that interesting for our society, is that? But for those that somehow aren't in the know, Nickelodeon currently is on the chopping block. Disney, you're next. Concerning the treatment of child actors from, the 90s and early aughts, the early 2000s, which is a weird feeling for both of us, I would think, because I was definitely on the wave of Cartoon Network is better, but Nickelodeon was a really big part, just of the culture, of childhood, for me and so many others. So the emotional palette of everything that's come out with, like Drake Bell and Amanda Bynes and literally everything around the name Dan Schneider, is
tainted.
It's tainted's the word. Meredith definitely has a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts. But they're kind of intertwined. But before we can get into what any of that is, we gotta get some facts out on the table about everything that went down. So, wife of mine, could you enlighten the people?
So, a documentary came out, I believe, on Netflix.
Yeah, Quiet on Set, which, by the way, is
a great
goated titles. That is a great title for this.
I agree. Great titling.
I wish I could title the podcast episodes that cleanly every time.
It came out maybe 2 weeks ago at this point, and is pretty much another expose in the repertoire of our generation's exposés.
I keep telling people, man,
whatever you do in darkness will come to light.
It's not done. Got a verse on that too.
Yeah,
actually.
And this was an expose essentially on a lot of the Nickelodeon execs, especially Dan Schneider, who was one of the producers, I believe, of several Nickelodeon shows like Drake and Josh, iCarly, so on and so forth. He was pretty much one of the foundational people of Nickelodeon in its heyday. And pretty much this documentary interviewed Drake Bell, Amanda Bynes, like you had already mentioned, and I think a few others like Jeanette McCurdy from iCarly.
Yeah, a lot. Because a lot more people than the names that we're gonna drop in this episode have come forth.
And or were directly affected if they didn't come forward. Pretty much the sexual allegations, sexual abuse, the long hours that these kids were working. The list of crimes is extensive. Which I think, for the purpose of our discussion today, kind of begs several questions. One of which is it ethical for kids to be working, especially in the entertainment industry? That's one of the ones in my mind that's been bouncing around the last week or two, is how much can a kid be involved in the entertainment industry, if at all? If at all. Which has some interesting ramifications. There's so many different things that we're going to talk about, but I think you had a couple good
for me it's,
I have squirrely mom brain, so I'm I have a million things at once.
Oh, no, trust me. It's on my notepad here. 2 specific points of hypocrisy that, to me, all of this stuff around Nickelodeon is exposing. And I think these aren't new, all right? Like the stuff that culture's been talking about for the last few years has been baking this in me. But, the Nickelodeon stuff kind of really brings it to the surface. And so it's these two. The hypocrisy that I personally am already seeing in our culture is twofold. Firstly, the hypocrisy of what I'm going to call selective deconstruction, and I'll get into that. And two, the hypocrisy of claiming to desire freedom while rejecting the king who sets captives free. Those two things right there. And as far as my first thing goes, selective deconstruction, it is still somehow vogue to be a Christian deconstructionist and deconstructing the faith. One of our preaching elders at Exodus Church, where we go to on Sundays, had a great line on that just a Sunday or two ago about where you should be aiming your questions as a deconstructionist, right? Why is the first thing that gets questioned the faith that's been handed down from the apostles rather than your subjective experience of faith?
Right.
Why is that always the direction of the questions? And what I think is very interesting is what happened on set, right? What is revealed in the Quiet on Set documentary. That sort of stuff has gone on way too often in churches around the country, right? Like the Southern Baptist Convention's been under fire for it. Catholicism stays the butt of this kind of a joke in pretty much everything. And people's response is not just to affirm the abuse, is not just to affirm the victim in all of this. It's not just to call it's not just to call for the guilty parties to have justice met out to them. All perfectly valid and righteous reactions. But like you said, it's questioning the entirety of the institution.
Right.
Not a good question. Like, why do y'all keep propping up leaders like this? Perfectly valid question. Ask it until you get a satisfactory answer. Keep pissing people off, okay? What I mean by that is saying, well, then there's nothing good that can come out of this institution whatsoever. Let's burn it all to the ground. Even churches that are doing good, yep, even them, they're part of the problem. Well, how can they be part of the problem if they're actively exposing it doesn't matter. I want it gone. I want it gone. Let's go into the Bible. Let's make it gender neutral. Let's go into the Bible. Let's remove everything that ever offends me ever.
Right.
Whoa, buddy, hang on. Quick question to expose your hypocrisy. Why is it that when stuff like that happens in the church, you want to burn the entire church down? But when it comes out that this has been happening in your favorite childhood entertainment channel, you don't want to burn all of your old VHS tapes of Rugrats. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to delete Drake and Josh from human history.
Right. Yeah. Because, I mean, just a few years ago, what the name, probably should have looked at the name before we started, but there was another documentary on Nickelodeon. I remember watching when Amari was like itty bitty baby, nursing around the clock at night. And it was pretty much talking about how like revolutionary Nickelodeon was as a channel, because when at its infancy stage, the channel was geared towards kids by kids. Like all the goofy antics and the slime and the game shows were all kind of stemming from a kid's imagination in a way that no other channel was doing, and so I think now, like, you don't, like, what to your point is, like, we don't see people questioning, like, the ethics of Nickelodeon existing, you know, because just a few years ago, not even 2 years ago, Mari's not even 2, that documentary came out and they were praising Nickelodeon for being revolutionary. Blue's Clues having an interactive kids show, unlike PBS Kids, because PBS Kids wasn't doing that. Like having a, Steve talk to you and you're involved in finding clues. Like, that was innovative for kids' entertainment and educational entertainment as that, So they were very innovative in what they were doing compared to the competitors like Disney and PBS and all that.
Right. But let someone try and defend the church that way.
Right.
Then and say, well, there are good things that have come out of the church, and all of a sudden all that stuff gets thrown to the side, and you get labeled as, like trying to, whitewash the abuse as like a defense of abusers and all that stuff. And I'm like, look, as someone that kind of sort of grew up on Nickelodeon. Like I said, more Cartoon Network because it was superior. But as a kid that was like, yo, like I watched Fairly Odd Parents, I watched Jimmy Neutron, like I watched these things, man. You know, I remember all that. I remember that. You know what I mean? Like I remember the Rugrats era before SpongeBob became the king of Nickelodeon. I remember that. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember all that. I wouldn't then look at somebody who's like reeling from everything that's come out that they weren't a part of, that they would have never agreed to, and call that person, oh, well, you're part of the system of oppression and all this other stuff. I think there's a way that needs to be talked about, which is part of my next point.
Right.
But this point is just to say that people seem to be much more eager to deconstruct Christianity than the culture of child entertainment that they actually grew up on.
Right.
And to me, like I said, maybe I'm weird, and I probably am, but like I said, to me, that seems to smack of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
You know, because as those who have been, as the handful of people that have been coming with me on the journey through the Sermon on the Mount know, Jesus taught about this. We had this conversation earlier in the podcast in Matthew 6 and 7, that hypocrisy is not just in the church. It's everywhere, people. Hypocrisy is something you will encounter in every facet of life, no matter how spiritual or not the people claim to be. And so that's why Jesus said what he said in Matthew 7. Be careful how you judge, because when you stand before me, I'm going to use your same ruler and rubric to judge you. Right? So how about we just have a culture of bringing holy correction to each other, regardless of how spiritual a person claims to be. Because last time I checked, the humanity of people does not increase depending on their physical proximity to a sanctuary of a church.
Yeah.
Last I checked, people are made in the image of God, whether they're on the set of a Nickelodeon show or whether they're on stage singing Amazing Grace in Sunday worship.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't understand why we're holding churches to this high standard, which I would call a basic standard of don't do injustice to people made in the image of God.
Yeah.
You only get mad at churches for doing that.
Right.
But non-church organizations get the grace of nuanced opinion.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Which brings me to my second point. The fact that our culture loves to claim to desire freedom while rejecting the very king that sets free. And for that, I do actually have scripture. I was thinking of Matthew, but I like the way I like the details that Mark includes a little bit more. But like I said, we're going through Matthew right now. So
you gotta expand a bit.
I guess. By one book, I suppose. Mark chapter 5. I'm just going to read it because it's a very readable story. Reading out of the Christian Standard Bible, Mark chapter 5, verses 1 to 20, it says this. They came to the other side of the sea, to the region of the Gerasenes. As soon as he, Jesus, got out of the boat, a man with an unclean spirit came out of the tombs and met him. Now note some characteristics. He lived in the tombs, and no one was able to restrain him anymore, not even with a chain, because he often had been bound with shackles and chains, but had torn the chains apart and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. This is a sad state of existence, yeah? If anyone's a victim, sounds like it's this guy. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and knelt down before him, and he cried out with a loud voice, "What do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you before God, don't torment me." For Jesus had told him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." "What's your name?" he asked him. "My name is Legion," that famous answer that's inspired so much, Hollywood movies. "My name is Legion," he answered him, "because we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the region. A large herd of pigs was there, feeding on the hillside. The demons begged him, "Send us to the pigs so that we may enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. The herd of about 2,000 rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned there. The men who tended them ran off and reported it in the town and the countryside, and people went to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and saw the man who had been demon-possessed sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs. Then they began to beg Jesus to leave their region. What? As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged him earnestly that he might remain with him. Jesus did not let him, but told him, "Go home to your own people and report to them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So he went out and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and they were all amazed. Right? The specific thing that I want to lift out of that story for today, right? If you want the full exegesis of that scripture, then you should definitely subscribe and hit the bell for when the next episode comes out, where we're going to be really bringing all the societal impact of that story to the light. But for our purposes today, just know that to me, the people seemed more afraid of Jesus saving the demon-oppressed man than the consequences of their continued idolatry. And they reject Jesus as a result, which I think, again, is crazy. In short, we claim to want the consequences of our sin to go away while rejecting what would actually remove them, aka repenting of our sin and living faithfully to Jesus Christ. Like I said, crazy. But as much as we cluck our tongues at that community, is that not us when it comes to child actors?
Yeah.
Right? Are we pacifying ourselves? Are we suppressing this truth and unrighteousness of the fact that we very well maybe have offered up our children to pedophile dens for the sake of our own entertainment and for the sake of securing the bag monetarily? Yeah. Question that we really ought to meditate on. And to that point, Meredith has done much more looking into as far as child labor laws and that sort of thing. And like I said, she had some crazy stuff written on that note card over there.
Yeah, I think, like I said, one of my biggest takeaways and a lot of the discussion I've been seeing on social media has to do with like just the ethics of kids being in the entertainment industry. For a couple months now, there's been like a growing trend on a lot of like influencers blurring the face of their kids on their TikToks and Reels and all that, just because they realized their kids were starting to get noticed, and they were like blasting all of their kids' life for their own revenue income, and that's pretty icky, and so the way a lot of them will combat that is they'll just blur off the face of their kid, which you're still blasting their life on social media, but now they're just not recognizable. I was like, okay, that's one way to go about it, right? And then I think you see another example of that, since the Industrial Revolution, we have the Department of Labor, right? And making all these child labor laws in each state. There's like the federal level, but then the state has control more so on like how often kids can work, like how long a shift, certain things that they're allowed to do or not allowed to do, certain certificates and little clearances that they have to get done, right? And I think something like one of my biggest takeaways is there's a lot more specifics on the DOL's website that's accessible anyways. There might be all the different, nooks and crannies.
Department of Labor.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Sorry if I said DOL. But yeah, there might be a lot of nook and crannies on the website. I just didn't see the nuances of the entertainment industry, but I found a crap ton on, kids working in restaurants, or, there's stuff on mining. There's stuff on all of these things that were relevant maybe like 100 years ago, 100 or 200 years ago, and the Industrial Revolution was a thing, or shortly thereafter. And there's stuff on like farming, which would be relevant. You think of like homesteaders and hiring your kids to help with the farm. Yeah, sure, that's relevant in our current culture. But I think especially with the current discussion that we're having and in our culture, you see a lot of loosey-goosey, open to interpretation kind of laws as far as entertainment goes. You know, like if you were to look at their little map on their website for each states, like you have certain states like, I think it was Indiana or Iowa, one of the I states. There's like nothing. And it's pretty, just don't be stupid. You know, it has to have a parent sign off on the work, and they can't do certain things. Like you can't have a kid sing in a nightclub. You know, things like that should be a no-brainer, right?
Should be.
And then you have the state of California, and it's very long compared to the other states for obvious reason. You know, that's where Hollywood and all that goes down. However, when you're reading it, you're like, dang, that could so easily be abused. And it has been. Very clearly has been. I think one of the best examples of that is a joke in our culture. You know, like I remember learning about it as a kid and thinking like, oh, yeah, that's clever workaround, is Full House. You know, everybody knows the story of the Olsen twins. They weren't cast as twins in the show. They were twins that were cast to play one role, because a 9-month-old baby is not legally allowed to work for, you know, a 12-hour day on set. So instead they hired a set of twins to take turns to be able to get the work done for the show. You know, like we joke about that, you know, that's a pretty common little factoid, right? About Hollywood, but, you don't really see a lot of stipulations on work days and things like that. I think I was telling you about this the other day, there's a viral clip of Miley Cyrus, on my social media. It just kept coming back on my feeds. And she was talking about, it was a different interview for a different thing, but she was given her like calendar for when she was 12 years old and like the heyday of Hannah Montana. Again, during our childhood, like that to me was like my show was Hannah Montana. And she was going through, she had a whole long 4-year stretch of 14-hour days at 12 years old. You know, just nonstop from the moment she woke up to the time she went to bed. It was interviews and script memorization and rehearsals and all of this. And yet there's no, you know, at the federal level, there's workarounds, you know, and their state level, there's also workarounds. And so it's so easy for that abuse. It's ripe for abuse.
And for context, people, right? If you can't already imagine 14 hours being long, just whatever you do to earn, like whatever your job is, I want you to imagine doing it in 14-hour shifts.
Yeah.
What, like most days of the week? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, for comparison, right, my job, respiratory therapy, right, managing ventilators and doing who knows what else in a day, right, 12-hour days. 12-hour days. You might go over if an emergency happens on your floor, right? You know, at shift change. Okay, now you're looking at 12 and a half, maybe 13.
But maybe. How many days of the week are you doing that?
Working 3 days a week.
Yeah. You know, 12-year-old child stars working most days of the week to do a constant turnaround of episodes for a hit TV show on a major platform.
Yep.
You know, like...
And if y'all don't think acting is work,
yeah,
it's work. Yeah. It's not blue-collar work, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. It's not the same thing as, you know, it's not as crazy as, like, a busy day for me. But, like, heck, I remember doing plays in elementary school. Mm-hmm. Like, elementary school plays that don't matter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yo, like, this is...
It's a lot.
That's a lot of work.
And the thing,
my brother's in theater.
Yeah. You know,
you know, when he's actually doing a show, it's like, oh, that's actually kind of like a rigorous schedule. Like, wait, y'all rehearsal 6 hours? Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
and there's a mental and physical side to it. There's a lot of elements to it. Like, my baby sister does theater and does some work for like recording for like a kids YouTube channel and stuff too. Like, she's into that whole world. But there's very strict like boundaries and rules around it, you know? And I think that leads to the discussion at hand, right? Is if you're going to have a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, you know, think of what you were doing at 12 years old. You were not working for 14-hour days. Most adults don't do that. You know, you're going to have...
And if you were, you were doing it to get to a point where you wouldn't have to, right?
Exactly. And
come on.
But to your point about the valuing, right, is that we look at actors and we kind of scoff like, oh, it's not really work. It's fun. They're living the dream. They're getting the bag. You know, they're making millions. But that leads to, I know, a point that you're going to get to here in a moment of looking at your kids as your income. You know, you think of Miley Cyrus and the countless number of child stars of our generations. I feel like I would say like 98% of them have come out and said that either they were abused or the impact of acting as a kid in their formative years left some kind of psychological disconnect in their life, you know?
And to the point that she was making a second ago, just about like, you know, like the Olsen twin workaround, like they got around that by having twins, you know, twin girls cast in one role, so that way you could get a full day out of them because each one could do half the load, right? So like, I don't know how long their days were, right? Maybe they were 10 hours, maybe they were 8, maybe they were 14, I don't know, right? But the fact still remains that you're just like you're playing the rule book. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what you're doing. Yeah. And Jesus had a lot to say on that, right? Read Matthew 23. He had a lot to say on that. Woe to you blind guides who say whoever takes an oath, whoever makes a promise by the temple, it means nothing. But whoever promises by the gold of the temple is bound by his oath. Yeah. What? What is this? What is this? In the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew 5, Jesus said, again, you have heard that it was said to our ancestors, you must not break your oath. You must not break your promises. But you must keep your promises to the Lord. But Jesus said, don't do that. Don't do it by heaven, because it's God's throne, or by the earth, because it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem. It's the city of the great king, right? Let your yes be yes and your no mean no. Anything more than this is from the evil one. What he was saying there is what people would do is they would promise not by God, but they would promise by some lesser thing in creation and then say that, oh, well, you know, that lesser thing isn't worth all that. Or, you know, they give themselves an out. Yeah. They would give themselves an out, right? To nullify their own promises. And Jesus is saying, no, that's of Satan. That's how Satan operates. Yeah. By promising something and then weaseling his way out of it. Yeah. Look at Satan in the garden. You'll be like, God, oops, sorry, you're dying instead. And is that not what happens a lot of the time? You'll get a bag. You'll be able to live the American dream. Oops, I'm sorry, you're dying instead. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. And on the topic of getting a bag, crazy how Jesus talked about that too. In the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew 6, what did he say? Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy, and where thieves don't break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. No one can serve two masters. He'll either hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The love of money drives people to all kinds of evil. Not money itself, but the love of it, the chase of it. Chasing after it like you're chasing after wind. Being able to say, yes, my child's mental, spiritual, social, physical well-being is worth the sacrifice for quote-unquote generational wealth.
Right. Yeah.
Come on, man.
Right, you know, like, I'm more of a Disney kid, so I have more of the Disney stars on my social media.
Like I said,
however, Disney's next.
Disney's been playing the game better than everybody else. You know what I'm saying? They're abusing kids and all that stuff, but they get away with it by being openly pro-rainbow. And now I can't touch them. Now I can't touch them. Yeah. But I don't care because I'm crazy.
Yeah. But to your point of, like, what's more important to you, like your family's generational wealth to come or your kids' well-being? You know, like Dylan Sprouse from Zach and Cody. So that Zach and Cody was talking about that. That's why his mom put the twins in child acting, because they needed money. And that was a way to make a lot of money very easily because, you know, both boys had a knack for acting. You know, and I find it interesting. One of the two is not even in acting anymore. You know, a completely different thing. And the other one has a pretty level head about him, which I think is pretty cool. Like, that's pretty rare to see, you know. However, you know, he doesn't say that it was easy to go through all of that, you know, and he was very tactful and I would say very gracious about it in the interview that I watched. But he was saying, you know, like, I don't agree with all the moves my mom made as a kid. However, I see the motive was for, we got to get bread on the table somehow because what we've been doing isn't working, you know? You know, and like I said, he was very tactful about it, but you could see like kind of the hurt there of like, yeah, but I shouldn't have been working because I was the kid, you know?
Right. In other words, people are either overtly or subtly referring to this idea of a way that things ought to be.
Right. Which we never want to claim, because what would that actually be claiming? You know, it says that there's supposed to be some level of order and structure to the way things should operate, and we don't want to say that, because that means what do we have to subject ourselves to?
Right. But even more than that, right, is because we want to claim this idea that like all family setups are equally valid, and by valid we mean effective. Right. Even though like that's demonstrably by the numbers not true.
Right.
By anyone's lived experience not true.
I mean, you see, like, when we talk about a fatherless home, there's an automatic picture of how that family structure is, you know?
And there's an automatic resistance to really wanting to talk about the true effects of it. Because, you know, we want to take that as some kind of attack on women. And be like, oh, so you're saying that a woman can't step up to the plate and, you know, be a father? And I'm like, I mean, depending on what you mean, I do, actually.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think that, you know, I think that any single spouse is going to be, you know, single dad, single mom, whatever, is going to be less effective than both, even though
they might be an all-star dad or an all-star mom, you know, doing the best that they can with what they're given, however, or what they made.
Yeah.
But
that's like days where you don't have enough therapists in the hospital. And yes, it does happen because everyone's understaffed. But you feel that.
Yeah.
Even with if everyone working at the hospital is the best at what they do, if you've got 30 rooms and you've only got enough nurses for like 10 rooms, you're gonna feel that, and you're gonna have to do things less optimally.
Yeah. Because
of the fact that you're out of ratio.
Right.
I got too much work and not enough hands to do the work. Same exact idea in the idea of a family. You need a mom and a dad. When you're missing one, the other one has to do things in ways that are less optimal than maximally optimal to get by. And yes, you show honor to that person for staying in the cut and doing what they got to do. But our culture wants to be insane and say that one person trying to do the work of two is the equivalent of two people.
Right.
Crazy.
And when there's a very obvious deficit. Like I said, when you say fatherless home, there's a mental picture compared to saying a single mom. You know what I mean? Like when you think of fatherless home, there's all the things that come from it. You know, their kids are probably rowdy or, you know, whatever. The long list. Don't need to say something that people already know. But all that to say is that, like, you know, going back to the Dylan and Cole Sprouse interview, or Dylan Sprouse interview, there's a way things ought to be. And I think to your next point here, if I'm not mistaken, is like, you know, the parents ought to be protecting their kids instead of exploiting their kids. You know, like there's that workaround I was telling you about with like the mommy influencers just blurring their kids' faces. And like, I don't know if that's not exploiting your kids still, you know. Like you're still showcasing their routines and you're still showcasing their preferences and all of their daily rhythms and routines for the sake of income. However, you know, one of my things that I've been thinking about is, should I be consuming that content? You know, like, should I be feeding into that system in the same way with child stars? Like, should we be allowing kids to be exploited for the sake of our income? But rather, should we be encouraging them to be protected and not be in the industry at all? You know?
Like, I want to take this moment here just to make clear. Firstly, if the content is blessing you, come on, man. Give it a share. Give it a share. Give it a subscribe. Get it out there, bro. You already know. All right, we're going to delve into the topical stuff and give you the tea that you want scripturally. All right. But secondly, I want to say that I do believe that it was a work of God that all this stuff comes to the light. Yeah. Like, why do I say as often as I do that, like, God is the God of exposure? Because he takes credit for that in the scripture. Ephesians 5:13 specifically says, everything exposed by the light is made clear. For what makes everything clear is light. Therefore, because of that statement, it is said in the Psalms, get up, sleeper, and rise from the dead, and the Messiah will shine on you. God is in the work of exposing the darkness of the systems in our culture, so that, not for the sake of condemning us, but for the sake of showing us what Jesus the Messiah would love to do in and through you. This is how you're doing things now, but like Jesus to that township that had the demon-possessed man, let me save this demon-possessed man, let me parade him in front of you, and you see him clothed in his right mind, free of demonic oppression, and you know what he used to be. I did that for him. I can do it for you too. But it will require you to give up your worship of the idols that landed that man and many others in that position. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to let the kingdom of Christ be the thing that runs the show? If so, you can be free. If not, let the slavery continue. And I'll respect your decision one way or another. But I say that to say that, yeah, God's definitely on the side of the abused, right? Like, God's the one that definitely set the dominoes up, and however that happened for that to be exposed. But what we want to do for the remainder of this is to use it as an object lesson.
Yeah.
Right? In my second point,
yep, that
a life faithful to Jesus Christ would have short-circuited all of this before it happened. Would have. Like, what was that one, TikTok or whatever you saw of, like, the one mom just, like, listing the stuff that was happening and being like, right. That's not going to fly.
Right. You want to make what kind of joke? That baby don't even know what that means. No. You want her to lick what now? No. You want to put a sock where? No.
Crazy, bro. She just kept listening off, and every answer was like, the devil is a lie. No. The devil is a lie. No. Like, that's what happens when you got like a godly parent on set, right. Bro. Right. I'm standing in the way. But to get there, we're going to have to go through. Gonna have to. I tried. Guys, I tried to find another avenue through it. We got to go through 1 Corinthians 11. I know. Most controversial chapter in the New Testament. But it's the place that really lays it out the clearest, as far as what's relevant to what we're talking about. So, 1 Corinthians 11, verse 3 only, Paul writing says, but I want you to know that Christ is the head, there's that evil word, is the head of every man, and the man is the head of woman, and God is the head of Christ. All right? Now, I know how culture lies and says that what that means is women are slaves and subjective in a servantile sense to the man, to the husband. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know that's what you're told. Let me bring some other scriptures to light, right? And let me explain this one, right? That word head in the Greek is kephale, right? Which means head. It's crazy how that works. But it also denotes this idea of a cornerstone that unites two walls together into one thing, right? The other thing is, again, just the idea of the head, right? Like the head of a body, like the head of a human body, because Paul will use that same analogy later on in 1 Corinthians to talk about spiritual gifts, right? Like the idea of the human body, and everyone is kind of a different part, but we all come together to make this beautiful God-knitted whole. To me, what I think is interesting to note about a physical head, right? Every human being has 5 senses. Right? 4 of your 5 information gathering senses are located where?
On the head.
In your head. Right? And what do? We use them. You know, you have eyes, so you look for danger. You look for what's safe. If you smell, you wake up in the middle of the night, you smell smoke. Oh, snap, I should probably call 911.
Yeah.
If I wake up in the middle of the night and I hear, what sounds like an axe murderer through the window, all right, it's either time to grab the shotty, the Glock, or call people that have them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like 80% of your sensory input comes through the head. And then it's the head, obviously, that makes the decision from all 5 senses on what to do. Right? And so what Paul is saying is, that's the husband. Right? When you look at the context of chapter 11, it's clear he's talking about the marriage relationship. The husband is the head. He's the cornerstone that all these different walls, right? Wife and children, all these different walls unite on him. He is the one that is supposed to be the one that has that decision-making authority on what to do with information, right? Like, he's the one that should be the one doing that. And to that end, man, like Drake Bell's story to me, right?
The perfect example.
The perfect example of what happens when you destabilize the head of the household, right? Look, I know that they got divorced. I don't know why. I'm not trying to opine on that. All right? I'm not trying to opine on the situation. I don't know. Chances are the divorce was sinful, according to Jesus, right? Because if it's not cheating or abuse or abandonment, it shouldn't have happened, right? Now, if one of those situations is there, cool, right? But the damage is still going to be felt. But some of the other scriptures I wanted to mention here, Colossians 3, verse 21, fathers, specifically, Paul does not say fathers and mothers. He doesn't say mothers. He says fathers, do not. Oh, wow. So we have something specifically to the fathers that's a limitation. Well, already that goes contrary to what people tell you the Bible says about fathers, right? That the Bible gives a green light to men and dads to do whatever they want. No, fathers, do not exasperate your children so that they won't be discouraged, right? Don't run them ragged and strip them of hope. No. Don't do that. And I think part of the reason he addresses it to fathers is because maybe God through Paul knows that that's more a pitfall of a dad than a mom.
Yeah.
Right? Not to say that moms can't do that, but who's prone to that?
Yeah.
Right? Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. Fathers, do not. Oh, snap, another limitation. Mm-hmm. Fathers, do not stir up anger in your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. That has so much that it needs to be its own episode, really, that the opposite of stirring up a child to anger is teaching them Christianity. Oh, snap. Well, that's already the opposite of what our culture believes, right? All the deconstructionists believe that it was being trained up in the way of God that stirred up their anger. But according to the Spirit through Paul, no, somebody did something wrong. Somebody did something wrong that they shouldn't have done, but it's not Christianity's fault. Interesting, right? So we see Paul laying out, fleshing out that headship authority of the father specifically in relation to the child. It's not authoritative. They are not your slave. You do not get to remove them from hope. You do not get to exasperate them and treat them any kind of way. And you do not get to stir up anger in them as you disciple them. Mm-hmm. That is not what headship means. That is not what it means. All right, and so Drake Bell, right? Sexually abused from the age 15 on up by Brian Peck, dialogue coach. Look, we're not one of these podcasts. I don't believe in naming names. Mm-hmm. All right, especially when it comes to people that have already been convicted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I name names. If you don't like that, I don't know, close your ears for that, I guess. But the interesting thing about this is that they started working together as, dialogue coach and student from not when he was 15, but from when Drake was 14. Right? And one of the things that Drake Bell himself is quoted as saying is, yeah, Dad was kind of not in the picture familially speaking since he was 5 because they divorced at 5, right? But Bell said, look, as a kid, he said, looking back, a lot of the stuff that he did, I probably should have seen it coming, right? Like, we had a lot of the same interests, which, again, Drake Bell says, looking back on it now that I think about it, was probably a calculated move on his part. Yeah, probably. But something I think is really cool is that he says, but my dad saw it a mile away. Not my words, his words. My dad, quote, saw it a mile away, unquote. What I didn't see. What I, as a kid, didn't see, couldn't see, whatever, my dad saw a mile away. And he was vocal. Before y'all get to being mad at Elder Bell, no, the man was vocal in those days about, hey, you shouldn't be touching him like that. Hey, why are you in dude's dressing room? Why are your hands on his shoulders? What is all of this? What is all of this? But what happened, you might ask? Well, Drake Bell, the son, catch this, the son fired the dad. Does that not sound weird to you? The son at 14 fired the dad?
It doesn't if he is the breadwinner.
Right? Like I said, it makes sense to me because dad's authority is already kind of shot just from the divorce. Just from the divorce, dad's authority is shot. And those of y'all that have had parents that divorced and y'all went with mom, y'all know what I'm talking about. How dad's authority is shot. Even if he's right. The divorce sometimes is an insurmountable hill to climb.
Yeah.
When you're trying to speak into somebody's life. Because in a way, you either sinned in such a way that you gave up that right, or you quit on the covenant and chose to give up that right. So now that you're trying to retain job benefits of authority without actually having the position, people rightfully are like, what are you talking about? That's not you anymore.
Yeah, who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are? Who do you think you were? You were that, but you gave that up. For convenience, because the marriage was hard, you gave it up. Or because you couldn't keep your genitals in check, you gave up that authority, sir.
Yeah.
In some measure, practically speaking, you just don't have the rock to stand on anymore to say stuff like that, boss.
Yeah.
Right? And so what happens? The sexual predator in this case, and when I say sexual predator, I'm using his own descriptor of himself. We have his diary from those days. He calls himself that. He talks about his process of finding prey in his own diary. Self-described sexual predator and okay with it. Right? And homosexual. Oh, Bakari, the fact that he's gay doesn't have anything to do with that. Look, I'm not saying everyone that's gay is a predator.
However.
What I am saying is that sexual deviancies are oftentimes paired and go together.
Yeah.
Crazy how that happens, right? Yeah. Isn't it crazy how so much of the Catholic priest pedophile stuff is same-sex pedophile stuff? Because degeneracy begets more degeneracy.
Love is love, though.
Look, I understand. This is why we're never going to get a sponsor. Totally get it. Totally get it.
Yeah.
Right? Totally get it. But the sexual predator comes in, creates an emotional attachment with the victim, wedges out the dad. And keep in mind, the sexual abuse, the actual abuse didn't start until after
Dad was out of the picture.
After dad was fully fired. Right? Even, this is how strong the headship dynamic is. Even divorced, even with his authority shot to the core, his vocal presence was enough to keep a sexual predator from actually doing the physical stuff. How much more if the marriage was intact? How much more had father and son had a healthy relationship? How much more impossible it is? It was already almost impossible for this guy to do what he did. He had to make moves for a year to get dad out of the picture. And this isn't even an ideal family setup.
Yeah.
Right? That's crazy. That's crazy to me, right? Dads, you're the head. Protect your kids, right? And I'll say it. This was a situation because the mom and the dad did not agree. The mom, for whatever reason, didn't see what the dad saw was happening.
He's just friendly.
He's just friendly. He's got money. You know? He's helping my kid get money. You know? And I know how these divorces work. My kid. Not your kid. My kid. Now there's a possessiveness and an ego that goes on in there.
Yeah.
Am I speculating? Yes. But I'm speculating off of a lot of what I've seen.
Right.
And off of just how human nature is.
Yeah.
Right? As un-PC as this is, you want to know what would have really helped Drake Bell in those days? Is if he had a dad that said, woman, what I say goes.
Yeah.
I'm the head. Pull him out.
Yeah.
Pull him off the set.
What do you mean? The show is like half him and, you know, or he's
Don't
half the
care.
show.
Don't care.
He is a foundational star of Nickelodeon.
He may
He will ruin the childhood of not just our son, but countless others who watch him.
Hey, that may be, but I ain't the head of all those other families.
Yeah.
That's my boy.
Yeah.
That's my boy. And if I got to go through you to get my boy out of there, then that's just what I got to do. All right? Not that the kid is more important than the wife, but you're prioritizing things that should not be prioritized.
Yeah.
Over people that ought to be prioritized. Isn't that crazy? But a complementarian, authoritarian dad would have been the thing that saved Drake Bell from years of abuse.
Yeah.
Years of abuse. And I somewhat wonder if Drake Bell kind of realizes that. Because after he got out of therapy for all of that, and he was like, okay, I'm in a place where I can like share my story, he actually reached out to his dad. And he was the one that actually invited him on to say his piece. Because again, Drake Bell's words and thoughts, not mine, but Drake Bell was saying, yeah, I figured that my dad probably blamed himself for a lot of it. And I wanted him to be able to get to a point of realizing that, no, there's only one person that's really at fault here. And I'm like, that sounds like wisdom happening. You know? And I'm not, maybe, you know what I'm saying? Maybe he still, believes his decision to fire his dad when he was younger works out. Is what he should have did. But I don't know. I feel like there's probably some regret in there.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah,
You let go of your one true advocate.
I was a stupid kid.
Yeah.
You know? Which is why I say kids should not be the heads of the household.
Yeah.
Right? That idea of head is not just authority, it's source, dog. Right? Kids should not be the source. You aren't supposed to be.
Yeah.
You aren't supposed to be. And weird stuff happens when you make the inexperienced, stupid kid that doesn't know a thing about life or the scriptures the head of the household. You're subjugating wisdom to the whims of foolishness.
Yep.
And we as a culture are surprised to see ships sink?
Yeah.
Come on.
Like, can you just imagine the dynamic of the household of like the Cyrus family? You know?
And there's more than that too, you know, the Ja Morant household for all my NBA heads out there.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Come on, man. Kids should not be the head of the house, bro.
Yep.
But our culture likes to remove the dad from his authoritative and sourceful position.
Yeah.
Why? Because Satan runs the world. And he understands that the easiest way to plunder a house, what did Jesus say, y'all? Is to bind the strong man. Come on, man. And in a family, who's supposed to be the strong man?
The kids, obviously.
Oh! You know?
Yeah.
Like, I would take wife before I heard kid. Right? Whether you're complementarian or egalitarian, right? And that's what I was saying to Meredith before. What's crazy is whether you're complementary and you actually think that there are defined gender roles, or if you don't, and you think that either husband or wife can do either one, we should be able to find a common point of agreement with the statement that kids are not in that discussion.
Yeah.
Right? The discussion is always ever, is it husbands that have authority, or can wives have a husbandly authority? No one in their right mind is arguing that 9-year-old son or daughter has authority over either of them. Who's arguing that? Well, apparently Satan. And this is what we see, you know? But again, you know, to all the people that want to deconstruct Christianity and say, well, what use are those archaic moral values? Would have saved one kid.
Yep. At least one.
Would have saved one kid 2,000 years in the future from being the subject of Dan Schneider, potential foot fetishist extraordinaire.
Yep.
And all of the other pedophiles that worked under him.
Yep.
Isn't that crazy? The 2,000-year-old book would have stopped a modern-day pedophile ring.
Yeah.
Had people actually lived by it. I'm not saying that they're hypocrites, because I don't know if these people ever claimed Christ. I'm just saying I think it's interesting how the very things that Jesus taught would have saved them a literal lifetime of heartbreak and sin and damage.
It's like, you can't say our culture is a Christian culture, but then say Nickelodeon is.
Come on, bro.
Like,
and I get it. All of us that were watching had no idea. You want to know why? Because we were also stupid kids.
Yep.
They didn't know any better.
Yep.
Like I said, looking back at some of the stuff that happened on iCarly, I'm like, yo, that's weird,
right,
bro.
Especially iCarly.
That's weird, bro.
Yeah.
But I was a stupid kid. What did I know?
Right.
And what's crazy is even as a middling teenager, I was kind of like, eh.
Yeah. And we're not just talking about spaghetti tacos.
Right. Right. Y'all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Y'all know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
You know?
You want my foot to do what?
Come on, bruh. Like, this is weird. This is weird. I don't want to speak it, but I mean, like, you know, OnlyFans trading? I'm just, well, you know?
Yeah.
Weird.
And like
weird,
we said,
man.
Disney's not off the hook either.
Disney's not off the hook. I'm just waiting for it to come out. That's all. That's all.
Yeah,
just waiting for it to come out. We'll be there.
Yep.
We'll be there to talk about it. You know? But in the meantime, we gotta be serious about this thing, man.
Yep.
Why do you think our opening crawl is the spiritual and social vision of Jesus? Because your doctrine, your theology should affect how you live. Should actually affect how your families are run. All right? This whole stupid idea, and it is a stupid idea, of don't teach your kids the faith. Because that would be shoving it down their throat. That would be making the decision for them.
Brainwashing.
No, it's not.
Kids.
No, it's not. As the entire deconstructionist movement points out, as any kid that goes off to college and abandons the faith points out, there is absolutely nothing that I as a parent can do to force my kid to take on Christianity. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Even if I change you up in my basement, all you would have to do is act.
Yep.
In your head, I haven't touched a thing.
Yep.
Right? In you, the person, you might hate Jesus. I can't make that happen for you. Right? So this whole language of, well, I don't want to make my kids something they're not. If you train them right, you won't.
Right.
You won't. Because you'll be showing them who Jesus is. You'll be showing them what the world is. And you'll hopefully train them up to make a rational decision. Come on, man. But the alternative is what? That we know the truth and won't pass it on? That we'll just watch our kids struggle and blunder and get eaten up and spit out by the world? All because of some culturally imposed moral standard that somehow is more admirable than simply telling your kid, hey, there's a God that loves you. There's a God that has made you more valuable than the way that you are currently treating yourself.
But that's hateful to say that.
Apparently that's abusive parenting.
Yeah.
All right? This is where y'all just got to split off from the world and say, y'all are the weird ones.
Yeah.
Me telling my kid that God loved them so much that he gave up his life for them is in no way an abusive message.
Yeah.
Right? And you giving your kid up to all this stuff. Right? And again, this is more of a part 1. Like I said, if you want the part 2, listen to the next sermon in Matthew. Because I'll be handling that a bit more, right? This was for us to be convicted. Right? The conversation as far as it pertains to Dan Schneider and the leaders and all that stuff, next time. Next time on the podcast. But as Jesus himself said in the Sermon on the Mount, before you go around calling out logs, worry about your own specks.
Yep.
All right. So that's what we hope this episode really enables and pushes you in the direction to do.
Yeah.
To really, get to thinking in your own self.
Yeah.
How much do we normalize sacrificing our children for money?
Because like I said, I don't know. Should I still be following those influencers? Should we still be watching reruns of our favorite childhood shows on Nick and Disney?
Right? And how much are we going to complain about the sexualization of children when we were all part of it? And like you said, in a feeding the machine kind of sense.
Yeah.
Before you can call out the culture, you got to recognize that culture is you. It's me. Culture is us.
Yeah.
We can never be the solution because we were always part of the problem.
Yep.
It's a good thing we don't have to be.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that God came down and became that solution for us, right?
Yeah.
Come on, man. Share the episode. Share it on social media. Get it out there. I'll do my best to give it a provocative, clickbaity title. Y'all gotta help me out and share it.
Yeah.
All right. A clickbait title is worthless if people aren't sharing it. And y'all share all sorts of crazy stuff anyway. Russian election fraud and all sorts of other nonsense. COVID conspiracies. How about you share actual bread and water?
Indeed.
Come on, bro. Any closing thoughts, Meredith? Give the people a zinger. Give them your truth, Meredith.
Hey, be careful what you watch, and be careful what you feed, and be careful what you're sharing,
Big facts.
For us, is we were sitting on this for a couple days before we decided to have a public dialogue about it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I don't know what my conclusion is even, but I do know based off these facts, I have a lot of meditating to do on that topic, and we hope that you guys do the same.
Yep. Kingdom constructionists over here.
Oh.
Not deconstructionists out here.
Clearly, you're the one with the zingers.
That's what we are, right?
Yeah.
We'll deconstruct sin all day.
Yep.
But only to help us construct a life that is faithful to Jesus. And on that note, y'all, peace.
Yeah.